Hi there, my name's Katie and sometimes I quilt. Over the last couple of weeks I've been busy with my day job, but also doing a little bit of travel. So today's going to be all about what I did leading up to going away and then the travel bit. I'm going to start by showing you what's in my quilting travel kit. So this is what we would know from back in the olden days as a hard disk case. So nice little pouchy bit there, piece of elastic here, and then enough space for a couple of reels of thread, my scissors, my needle threader, and my appliqué. I've also packed a clip because you never know when you might need one. And then in the tin that the scissors actually came in, put that there. What I've done is I've taken, that's foam at the bottom, I've taken the cutout layer of foam out that had the scissors in it and then put some pins and some needles. Now, the foam was really handy because I had an impromptu pin cushion. However, I've decided there are a few improvements I need to make and I need to have a bit of a think about that before I do it. So there are like 3 or 4 needles and about a dozen little tiny applique pins in there. Now the scissors themselves that came in the tin are these ones. Now I feel like I'm a beauty influencer. Is that going to, I'll hide behind it. And what you can probably see now is they've got a lovely blunted point on them. These are designed for grooming, probably chopping nose hair or something. And so they've now been through a number of airports. However, this last trip, leaving Canberra, they wanted to look at them. Leaving Melbourne, they wanted to keep them. And it wasn't until I said, they actually have a rounded tip, they're not pointy. And then they opened up everything and pulled them out and inspected them, that they actually let me keep them. So they're not overly expensive ones. I think I got these on Amazon. So if I was to lose them, it's not like I've lost a $50 pair of scissors or something. It would just be annoying more than anything. But I just found it really interesting that a pair of scissors that I haven't actually had a problem with before, all of a sudden was a bit of a problem. Curious to know what type of scissors other people use that manage to get through. I used to have a little teeny tiny pair of scissors with blades on them, probably only sort of 1/2 inch, that used to get through security with no problems at all. But I lost them. And I have had a couple of pairs taken off me, but I never have any in my little travel kit that I wouldn't be willing to lose. So then we've got the appliqué, and this is what I was working on while I was away. I haven't done as much of it as I thought I would, but we've done that edge there and this one here, and then that edge there, and I've started on here, but it's also off center, and I'm thinking about whether I just leave it. I suspect I will, and it will just become part of the overall piece. So as you might see, that is some of my precious Hello Kitty Liberty that we're using right there. None of the applique itself is balanced. It's all a little bit skew-if, and that works fine for me. When I was getting ready to do the conference and I had recognised that I didn't actually have anything to sew while I was paying attention, I needed to prepare some blocks. So I've prepared 2. I've finished one of those 2, partway through the other one. And so now, the reason why this is such a mess, I'm getting 2 or 3 others ready to go, just to have ready for me to sew as needed, so that I've got some hand quilting or hands work with me when I need to travel or go to a quilt group or something like that. And because this is so little, it just slots into my handbag and it can come with me for doctor's appointments and all that sort of stuff as well. I have a couple of those because that's what we used to carry our hard drives in back in the day, and they're actually really useful and really handy, particularly the hard case. All right, so what we're going to do now is switch to overhead, and then we will see me preparing a couple of blocks. May also see a bit of flight time. All right, I'll see you at the end. Okay, so we're having a little bit of an update of a work in progress, really. So this is my Criswell Quilt, and Liliana's tail is doing a fabulous job of flicking its way through. And I'm just flipping through the blocks that I've completed. One of the challenges that I can see happening is making sure that the quilt itself is balanced. So different coloured backgrounds, different placements and that sort of thing. What I needed to do is have 4 darker blocks, and they're sitting in the corners. I think I have completed all of those by now, and now it's just a matter of getting the right combinations of fabric together to put things together. So what we're doing is preparing a couple of new blocks. So this one here, what I've done is I've printed this out on cardstock, so a heavier weight of paper, and I've just done the templatey bit. And what I'm going to do is to essentially cut these out and then trace them onto the right side of the fabric directly. Liliana eats pins, so we also need to try and keep the cat safe. Pro tip when cutting things out with paper, you'll notice here that I'm keeping my scissors in the one spot, but I'm actually moving the paper. I was recently surprised to know that not everybody realizes that you actually can cut things out a lot more accurately if you are doing things that way. So we're holding the scissors straight and we're cutting, and we're moving the paper. Another way that I like to put together applique pieces is using freezer paper. So freezer paper isn't actually widely available in Australia. I have had this roll of it for decades, and I've almost hit a point where it's time for me to pop onto Amazon and see if I can find some more, because I'm almost out of it. One of the features of this particular quilt is that there's almost like paper dolls. I don't know if other people did these or cutouts, things like that, but essentially the pattern gives you a quarter piece. Then what I do is I print it out, cut it out, and then I will take the piece, put it onto the freezer paper that's been folded into 4, and then trace the piece out and then cut it. What I'm then able to do is to put the freezer paper and iron it onto the right side of the fabric that I'm going to be using for applique, and from then on stitch that down and cut out the little bits and pieces and just deal with it that way. I have been known, particularly if they're pieces that I'm going to be doing more than once or twice, for leaves and flowers and things like that, to also use freezer paper for that. But at the moment I'm not really rationing it, but I'm actually using cardstock for that. But when I'm doing freezer paper stuff, broadly speaking at the moment, I'm folded it in 4 and off we go that way. One of the things about applique and getting the effect that you want is that there are so many different ways to get the shapes that you're after and to get them onto the fabric, and then being able to stitch them down and do the actual applique bit. I recently did some stuff with using fusible. Generally speaking, not something that I will use a lot of. I much prefer my applique to be needle turn. So in this particular case, I am making sure that my 2 pieces of pattern are being done in the ways that I need them to happen. So once we've got all of our bits and pieces together, it's time to start preparing our backgrounds and placing the shapes. Generally speaking, well, for this particular piece, I've got lots of squares. Now the squares are cut at about 12 inches. Some of these fabrics have been sitting in a box for quite some time, so I'm just spraying them with some best press or some starch and giving them a bit of an iron. I do this because I find that it's easier to get the shapes to apply, but also you want to start without wrinkles. Once we've done that, I'm going to start thinking about how it is that we want to start placing the shapes onto the piece. Now, in this particular case with this particular background, what I'm working with is a large leaf shape, and then there are a smaller leaf shape as well. In the end, I decided I didn't want to have the small leaf. I'm going to be making some design decisions as we go to change up some of the blocks and change out some, and I've actually designed a couple to go into the quilt to, make it uniquely mine. So at this point, what we're trying to do is to work out where it is that all of the shapes are going to go. Do we want to center it? So do we want the leaf shape to be running down the middle, keeping in mind that it is going to be sitting, it's not going to be on point. The blocks themselves are not on point. And we'll start making some fabric choices. As I've mentioned earlier, this particular quilt is going to have 4 dark squares, and they're going to sit in the outer corners. This is the 4th one. So what I've already done is I have just made some decisions around the other 3 blocks, and they're actually sewn. And I needed to make some deliberate decisions here about balance, about color choices, and about how these things were going to look. I needed contrast, so I had decided to go for some of the liberties that are white or lighter in background, and I've got a couple of choices here. I've got this absolutely gorgeous one, which I picked up at a craft show a couple of years ago, the white and blue, but I've also got a piece of Liberty that was a gift from a friend who had bought it in the UK when she was there a few years ago, and that's been sitting in stash for quite some time. The purple flowers are the choice that I ended up going with. So once we've made decisions about placement and all of that sort of fun stuff, it's time to start marking things out and cutting things out and getting them down and ready to go. So having made the decisions around what colour I'm going to choose for this particular piece of applique, the purple, I'm going to start thinking about, cutting it out, getting it ready to go. and enter a sandpaper board. So the sandpaper board gives you just enough texture so that marking tools will actually help mark. I'm going to be using a permanent pen for this, a Zig marker, and it's something that I bought a couple of boxes of a few years ago, and I am still working my way through those, and they're brilliant to work with. I am paying a little bit of attention here to where the bias sits, because I want the bias to go around some of the shapes because it makes it so much easier to turn them under. This particular piece is going to be rather simple in the overall scheme of things, just the one leaf across the center of the block, and it's going to be pretty visually impactful even in that sort of level of simplicity. So once we've traced out the shape onto the right side of the fabric, we then cut it out and apply it to the background. For the other piece, we've got the freezer paper applique, and the process for this is similar, but also slightly different. The freezer paper itself has a shiny side and a dull side, and what we need to do is to apply the shiny side to the right side of the fabric. So once we've decided on placement, and I will note that I did make a really big error with this one. If we have a look at the fabrics, everything here is directional. So my cats are directional on the background, very cute, but also very directional. And also the teacups and things like that in the pink feature fabric that I'm using are also directional. What I didn't think of is where the applique needs to sit on the block with that direction going. So the way that the cookie has eventually crumbled is that my teacups and teapots are slightly, off to one side where from the cats, and that is a decision I'm living with because Libet is expensive and I didn't want to go back and do it again. So once we've ironed the freezer paper onto the right side of the fabric, this is where we're able to then trace around it, again using the Zig permanent pen, and mark where the stitching line where it needs to turn under. Because of the nature of this particular piece, I won't cut out all of it intricately. So the little bits and pieces, there's 8 little indents, slits, little tiny bits. I will cut them and sew them as I go, but it's still going to be needle turn in the same way that everything else is as well. I did contemplate taking a couple of different approaches with it, but in the end, a lot of the other pieces that I've done in this quilt this is the method that I have used. Once I'm finished tracing everything out, I'm going to rough cut it. And when I say rough cut it, I mean just around the outside. I'm not going to get too concerned about cutting anything out in the middle. At the moment, I'm stitching this piece at the moment, as you would have seen at the beginning, and I haven't done anything on the inside yet. I will cut those bits out as I go. It helps cut down the amount of fraying. It helps cut down potential for things to shift around a bit. In an ideal world, well, not really in an ideal world, usually what I would do is I would glue baste this down. So I'd get some Roxanne's glue basted or something like that and put some dots on it and glue it down to hold it in place. What I have found though is that the Roxanne's glue for this particular type of piece gets a little bit too stiff and gets a little bit in the way. So hence I switched back to using applique pins. I would also like to note, as I am getting this piece on the background, I'm orientating it wrong and everything else like that, and I will quite literally realize that at about 2 o'clock in the morning when I wake up and think about it a little bit, because I won't be able to fit all of my pieces, and I was trying to work out what on earth I'd done wrong. Turns out that if you're not paying close attention, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing this for, you can still do things wrong. And that's fine, because it's all part of the learning and part of the process. What I'd really like to encourage people to do is to use the precious fabric. This is my very precious Liberty Hello Kitty fabric. I've used it in a couple of different projects now, but I really want to use every single little last scrap of this up and have it be in things that I enjoy using and that I like using and that I see every day. So often we put away the precious fabric and save it for a rainy day and hope that, one day the perfect project will appear for us to be able to use it with. And that doesn't happen, and it gets given away, sold, what have you, and you've never gotten to have the joy of using it. So as somebody who does enjoy thrifted fabrics, I would much prefer you use them than me being able to pick up your precious fabric at a secondhand shop or at a de-stash day or something like that. Particularly the ones that you get that have a little bit of sentimental meaning. So this particular fabric does for me. There is a sentimentality to Hello Kitty and my relationship with Hello Kitty because of a dear friend of mine who absolutely adored Hello Kitty, who unfortunately passed and left us too young. So I bought some of it, and I am slowly finding ways to use it. And I've got, I think, 3 different prints, and I'm just about to order some more. Use the precious fabric, because you bought it because you liked it, so you may as well use it. I am still at a loss as to how I didn't see the error that I was making in real time until later on when it suddenly occurred to me what the problem was. So once we've got our pieces and we lay them down on the fabric and we start placing them out, we've got some other design decisions to make. Do we want to follow the pattern 100%? I think we all know that the answer for that, for me at least, is no. We want to go rogue, so we will. As we start to pin things in place and I start to get a sense of where I want the Hello Kitties to be, what direction they're going to be, where everybody's going to sit, I think I've got my melody there as well. We're starting to see what the block is going to look like and how it's going to emerge. Now, if I'm honest, this is the part where I start to think, have I got a problem? Where is everything sitting? But it didn't occur to me until later. But I did get there in the end. I did figure it out. Go me. Okay, so thanks for sticking with me. And we'll see you next time.